Lieutenant Clya Cole's blood turned ice-cold when 3 chilling words crackled through her radio. They were being overrun. Peering through her rifle scope across a distance of 300 meters, she observed 12 muzzle flashes illuminating the jungle canopy like lethal fireflies. The SEAL team found themselves ensnared in a valley so densely vegetated that the sky remained invisible, enduring precision gunfire from positions they couldn't pinpoint, couldn't neutralize, and couldn't withstand. More than 50 enemy combatants had encircled them, creating a numerical disadvantage of 10 to 1, and the calculation was straightforward: within less than 10 minutes, 8 skilled soldiers would perish. Established procedure dictated waiting for aerial reinforcement, summoning the quick reaction force, and maintaining surveillance. As a single sniper equipped with 1 rifle, conventional wisdom suggested she couldn't influence the situation against 50 adversaries in fortified locations. However, Clya had never excelled at adhering to regulations when compliance meant witnessing deaths. She loaded a 50 caliber round into her Barrett M82A1, calibrated her scope to account for moisture and altitude, and transmitted one final radio message to Ground Team Alpha, instructing them to remain low while she commenced operations. The following 8 minutes would achieve legendary status, featuring 12 precision eliminations that transformed a potential slaughter into an astonishing survival, executed by a woman the adversary never detected until far too late. Clya Cole had secured her position within the Special Operations sniper community through the challenging path of surpassing all competitors. Standing at 5 feet 6 inches with auburn hair typically secured in a regulation bun, her appearance contradicted conventional expectations of a lethal precision marksman. The instructors at Fort Bragg had anticipated her withdrawal within 3 days, yet she completed the program at the top of her class with unprecedented accuracy scores. Now, following 2 combat deployments spanning 3 years, she was assigned to SEAL Team 7, executing operations in an undisclosed Southeast Asian nation where American military presence officially didn't exist and where actions officially never occurred. The jungle environment differed dramatically from any training scenario she had encountered. The triple canopy rainforest reduced visibility nearly to zero, while humidity transformed perspiration into an oily substance, and vegetation grew so thickly it generated its own meteorological conditions. The mission parameters had appeared straightforward. The SEALs would conduct reconnaissance of a suspected enemy supply center, observe and document findings, and avoid engagement. Clya would establish overwatch from the ridgeline, ensuring no one approached their insertion location. Intelligence had been catastrophically inaccurate. What analysts had designated as a suspected supply center actually functioned as a forward operating base for a battalion-strength hostile force that had been anticipating precisely this type of American incursion. The ambush had been executed with textbook precision. The SEALs advanced into the valley along what seemed to be an animal trail, maintaining sound discipline that would have rendered them undetectable to most opponents. However, whoever orchestrated this ambush had carefully studied American Special Operations movement patterns. They had permitted the SEALs to penetrate deeply into the kill zone before initiating the ambush from elevated positions on 3 sides, while the 4th side was obstructed by a river too deep and rapid to traverse under hostile fire. This classic L-shaped ambush configuration offered no escape route, no protective cover, and no possibility of survival. Clya had observed the situation developing through her scope, her elevated vantage point providing a comprehensive view of the unfolding catastrophe. Muzzle flashes erupted simultaneously from a dozen locations. The SEALs immediately returned fire and attempted tactical maneuvers, their radio communications remaining calm and professional even as their circumstances devolved into chaos. Then arrived the first casualty notification, followed by the second, and subsequently the assessment that arrested her heartbeat. They were outnumbered approximately 10 to 1, the enemy possessed superior positioning and firing lanes, and they required air support immediately or they wouldn't survive. Air support remained 30 minutes distant, the quick reaction force 45 minutes away, and the SEALs possessed perhaps 10 minutes before enemy forces advanced for the final assault. Standard operating procedure specified maintaining observation, supplying intelligence, and coordinating incoming reinforcement. As a solitary sniper, conventional doctrine indicated she couldn't alter the outcome. Clio had constructed her career around disproving conventional doctrine. She transmitted to Ground Team Alpha, identifying herself as Overwatch and announcing she had visual confirmation of multiple enemy positions and was preparing to engage. Following a pause, the team leader responded with strained but professional composure, directing Overwatch to maintain observation since engaging that many targets solo was impossible. Her response was simple: "Watch me." She then switched to receive-only mode. The Barrett M82A1 operated without subtlety, propelling 50 caliber rounds at nearly 3,000 feet per second with sufficient force to penetrate engine blocks and concrete barriers. Most snipers employed it against material targets, but Clio utilized it because in jungle terrain where enemies weren't always clearly visible, the massive projectile provided margins for error that smaller calibers couldn't offer. During the initial ambush, she had already catalogued the critical positions, 12 fighting positions on elevated ground, each containing 3 to 5 combatants, some equipped with heavy machine guns, all possessing clear firing lanes into the valley where the SEALs were sustaining casualties. The mathematics were severe: 12 positions, 8 minutes until complete collapse, 1 rifle, which translated to roughly 40 seconds per target, accounting not merely for the shot itself but for target identification, range calculation, wind compensation, firing, and immediate repositioning before counter-fire arrived. The task should have been impossible, yet Clio had established her reputation through impossible shots. She settled behind her rifle, regulated her breathing as she had performed countless times previously, and initiated the most intense 8-minute combat shooting sequence in Special Operations history. The first target stood at a range of 347 meters, an enemy machine gun position on the left flank, elevated 20 meters above the valley floor, with 3 visible combatants including 1 operating the weapon and 2 supplying ammunition. The gun was methodically destroying the jungle where the SEALs had established cover, delivering systematic fire that would eventually locate human targets. Clio centered her crosshairs on the gunner's thorax, applied minimal adjustment for the slight crosswind at this distance, identified the natural interval between heartbeats, and compressed the trigger. The Barrett thundered, and through her scope she observed the gunner vanish in a crimson mist as the 50 caliber round inflicted the devastation such projectiles deliver to human bodies at any range. She didn't pause to observe the remaining 2 fighters' reactions, already relocating 3 meters right to a secondary position she had prepared earlier. Return fire reached her previous location 5 seconds later, disciplined and accurate but striking vacant jungle. Time elapsed: 38 seconds, 1 position neutralized, 11 remaining. The second target at 298 meters occupied the valley's entrance, blocking the SEAL's sole withdrawal route. This position featured a PKM machine gun and at least 4 combatants, with the team leader specifically requesting fire on this location as it represented the cork in the bottle preventing their retreat. Clio acquired the gunner, adjusted for the decreased range, and fired. The round impacted low, striking the gunner's abdomen rather than chest, though with a 50 caliber projectile the distinction proved irrelevant since center mass anywhere meant catastrophic trauma and immediate incapacitation. She was relocating before the spent casing contacted the ground, moving to position 3, adhering to her philosophy of shoot and move, never firing twice from identical locations, never providing the enemy a stationary target to acquire. Time elapsed: 1 minute 19 seconds, 2 positions eliminated, 10 remaining. Target 3 at 412 meters represented an enemy position on the right side high ground with excellent oversight of the entire valley, functioning as a leadership element where she could observe 2 combatants with radios directing fire for other positions. Clio invested an extra second for this shot since the longer range entailed greater wind drift, increased bullet drop, and extended travel time. She stabilized her breathing, found the pause between heartbeats, and squeezed. The spotter with the radio collapsed as if someone had severed his strings. The second combatant reached for the radio, attempting to maintain coordination, but Clio had already chambered another round, executed a second shot, producing a second kill, and the leadership position fell silent. Immediately, the enemy's coordinated fire began deteriorating. Without centralized coordination, each position operated independently, lacking mutual support or tactical awareness. Time elapsed, 2 minutes 15 seconds, 4 eliminations, 8 positions remaining. The team leader transmitted that whatever Overwatch was executing should continue, as enemy fire was diminishing and they were regaining mobility. Clio didn't respond, already scanning for the fourth target, her breathing controlled, her mind locked into what instructors termed the zone, that state where time appeared to decelerate, where every variable crystallized with perfect clarity, where impossible shots became routine. Target 4 at 356 meters constituted another machine gun position, firing from behind a fallen log, providing excellent protection. The gunner demonstrated intelligence, exposing himself for only seconds at intervals to fire controlled bursts before dropping back. Clio waited, understanding that patience represented a sniper's greatest asset. The gunner would need to expose himself to fire effectively, and when he did, she would have approximately 2 seconds. When the gunner rose, shouldered his weapon, and began traversing fire across the SEAL position, Clio's crosshairs were already positioned for him. She fired the instant he appeared, the round striking his upper chest, and the massive energy transfer exceeding 10,000 foot-pounds at this range threw him backward over the log he had been using for protection. Time elapsed, 2 minutes 58 seconds, 5 eliminated, 7 remaining. By this point, the enemy had recognized they faced a serious sniper problem. Return fire toward her general vicinity intensified, though they couldn't determine her precise location. She employed terrain, vegetation, and constant movement to remain ahead of their targeting. Rounds cracked through the trees surrounding her, some close enough that she heard the supersonic snap as they passed, but she disregarded them since fear represented a luxury she couldn't afford while the SEALs depended on her. Target 5 at 289 meters consisted of enemy fighters attempting to flank the SEAL position from the left, advancing through thick undergrowth. This represented the most immediate threat since successful flanking would catch the SEALs in crossfire without cover. Clio tracked the lead fighter through the vegetation, a more challenging shot involving a moving target with partial concealment and shorter range, meaning reduced reaction time. She led the target slightly, accounting for his movement speed and direction, and fired. The round caught him in the side as he moved between 2 large trees, dropping him instantly, while the fighters behind him immediately went to ground and their entire flanking maneuver stopped cold from one well-placed shot. Time elapsed, 3 minutes 44 seconds, 6 positions neutralized, 6 remaining. Halfway through, with 4 minutes of continuous shooting that felt like 4 hours, her shoulder was bruising from the Barrett's recoil despite proper technique and the weapon's excellent recoil management system. Sweat ran into her eyes despite the headband. Her hands remained steady, but she could feel adrenaline beginning to fade with fatigue creeping in at the edges. She pushed it aside because the SEALs didn't need her tired. They needed her lethal. Target 6 at 445 meters represented a long shot, an enemy position on the opposite ridgeline attempting to target her location with a designated marksman rifle. She could see the glint of his scope as he scanned systematically for her position. This was personal, a sniper versus sniper duel of skill and patience. He demonstrated competence and methodical approach, had almost located her twice, but Clio had been executing this longer in worse conditions against superior opponents. She found him through her scope, calculated the long-range shot accounting for increased wind drift and significant bullet drop, and fired. At this range, the bullet required over a second to travel, and she watched through her scope as the distant figure jerked and fell backward, his rifle clattering away down the rocks. Time elapsed, 4 minutes 38 seconds, 7 eliminated, 5 remaining. The volume of enemy fire was noticeably reduced now, with the SEALs using the respite to reorganize, treat their wounded, and prepare for withdrawal, though they remained effectively pinned. Clio needed to eliminate the remaining positions before they could safely move. Target 7 at 312 meters showed enemy fighters regrouping behind a large boulder, attempting to coordinate a renewed assault, with 3 fighters in close proximity, dangerously close. Clio aimed for the center fighter, understanding that at this range, with the Barrett's massive .50 caliber round, significant overpenetration probability existed where the round could pass through one target and strike another behind it. She took the shot. The round hit the center fighter and continued, striking the fighter directly behind him, producing 2 kills with 1 bullet, unintentional but devastatingly effective, while the third fighter broke and ran, abandoning his position entirely. Time elapsed, 5 minutes 21 seconds, 9 positions. Eliminated, 3 remaining. The SEAL team leader transmitted they were preparing to move, his voice carrying new hope, and they required those remaining positions suppressed for withdrawal. Clio responded curtly that she was working on it, already searching for Target 8. Target 8 at 267 meters represented the closest remaining enemy position, which also made it the most dangerous to her, a heavy machine gun team providing sustained suppressive fire keeping the SEALs pinned in place. The gun shield made targeting the gunner directly almost impossible, so Clio shifted her aim to the ammunition bearer feeding the belt into the weapon. The round hit him center mass, and in his death spasm, he pulled the ammunition belt sideways, jamming the gun mechanism. The gunner immediately turned to clear the jam, exposing himself completely from behind the protective shield, and Clio's follow-up shot caught him before he could fix the problem or take cover. The heavy gun went silent. Time elapsed, 6 minutes 29 seconds, 11 positions neutralized, 1 remaining, 1 minute and 31 seconds left in her self-imposed 8-minute window. 1 more critical target, then the SEALs could execute their withdrawal under covering fire from the incoming helicopters she could now hear in the distance. Target 9 at 389 meters represented the last significant enemy position she could identify, another leadership element attempting to rally the remaining scattered fighters for a final desperate assault, with 2 fighters with radios and maps spread out before them, clearly officers or senior non-commissioned officers trying to coordinate what remained of their ambush. This needed to be absolutely perfect, eliminate them both decisively, shatter the enemy's command structure completely, and the remaining fighters would likely withdraw rather than continue a fight they were clearly losing. Clio took a deep breath, forcing oxygen into muscles beginning to fatigue. She acquired the first target, an officer gesturing emphatically while speaking into his radio, and fired, achieving a kill. She chambered another round with practiced speed, shifted smoothly to the second target who was already reacting, already moving. She led him slightly, anticipating his movement away from his fallen comrade, and fired. The second officer dropped before he had made it 3 steps toward cover. Time elapsed, 7 minutes 51 seconds, 12 enemy positions neutralized, 9 seconds to spare. The valley had transformed from a roaring cacophony of violence into an eerily quiet space punctuated only by sporadic, disorganized shooting. The devastating volume of coordinated fire that had been systematically tearing apart the jungle had collapsed into chaos, with individual fighters firing randomly without coordination, without leadership, without purpose. The SEAL team was already moving with professional efficiency, using the sudden suppression to withdraw in good order toward their extraction point, their training having prepared them for this, moving the instant the pressure lifted. The team leader's voice came through her earpiece, and for the first time, she could hear real emotion breaking through the professional column as he stated he didn't know what she had just accomplished up there, but they were mobile, getting their wounded out, and she had just saved 8 lives. He paused, and when he continued, his voice was rough as he said thank you didn't begin to cover it, but thank you. Clio allowed herself exactly 5 seconds to feel the satisfaction of mission success and the relief that came from knowing those men would go home to their families. Then professional survival instinct took over, and she was moving immediately, breaking down her position with practiced efficiency, preparing for her own extraction. The enemy would be actively searching for her now, and staying in one location was suicide. Every sniper knew the rule. The most dangerous time is right after a successful engagement when the enemy knows you're out there and is hunting specifically for you. She carried her rifle and gear through the dense jungle toward her backup extraction point, moving with the careful, deliberate pace that kept operators alive in hostile territory. Behind her, the sound of helicopter rotors grew louder as the quick reaction force arrived to provide covering fire for the SEAL team's withdrawal. Her radio crackled with a new voice, deeper and more authoritative, as the quick reaction force commander inquired about the SEAL team's security status and her own status. She responded professionally that she was mobile and clear, proceeding to the alternate extraction point with no immediate pursuit detected, her breathing controlled despite the physical exertion. The commander acknowledged and instructed her to sanitize her position and move to the designated landing zone where a bird would be waiting for extraction in 30 minutes. Clya confirmed and kept moving steadily through the jungle, needing to cover 2 kilometers of dense tropical terrain, reach the designated landing zone, and disappear before anyone came looking for the sniper who just turned a guaranteed massacre into an against all odds withdrawal. She made it in 23 minutes. The helicopter was already on the ground with rotors turning when she emerged from the tree line. The crew chief waved her aboard urgently, and as she climbed in and the bird lifted off, she finally allowed herself to fully process what had just happened. 12 precision shots, 8 minutes, 8 lives saved. Not bad for a day's work. The after-action review took place 72 hours later in a classified facility that officially didn't exist with people whose names were redacted from all official documentation. Clya sat across from a full-bird colonel from Special Operations Command, a SEAL team commander she recognized from previous operations, and her own unit's commanding officer. The walls were bare except for a large monitor displaying drone footage, radio transcripts, and ballistic analysis from her engagement. The colonel spoke first, his voice neutral and professional, stating he had personally reviewed all available footage from her engagement along with the SEAL team's helmet camera recordings, radio intercepts, and ballistic reports from the scene, and before proceeding, he needed her to walk him through her decision-making process in detail. Clya kept her voice calm and professional, the same tone she would use for any operational debrief, explaining that Ground Team Alpha was pinned down with multiple casualties, effectively surrounded and outnumbered approximately 10-1 based on muzzle flash count and radio intercepts, with air support estimated at 30 minutes out minimum. Standard doctrine would have dictated that she maintain her observation post and coordinate incoming support. The colonel stated flatly that she didn't follow standard doctrine. She confirmed this was correct, explaining she conducted a tactical assessment and determined that the team had less than 10 minutes before being overrun based on enemy movement patterns and the volume of fire, and she had the capability, position, and equipment to directly affect the tactical situation, assessing that taking action offered a higher probability of team survival than maintaining observation. The colonel noted she had engaged 50+ enemy combatants with a bolt-action rifle. Clya corrected, respectfully, that she didn't need to neutralize all 50 fighters. She needed to eliminate the 12 positions that were coordinating their fire, providing heavy weapon support, and directing their tactical movements, explaining that removing the coordination and heavy weapons transformed 50 fighters into 50 individuals without a unified plan. The SEAL commander leaned forward, his weathered face showing the strain of recent combat, stating that his men were alive right now because she disobeyed her explicit orders and conducted what was essentially a solo direct action mission in enemy territory. He wanted to be absolutely clear about something. From his perspective and from the perspective of every operator in that valley, she showed exceptional tactical judgment, remarkable combat skill, and saved American lives against impossible odds. He paused, glancing at the colonel. However, from a command perspective, the colonel sighed heavily, stating that Captain Cole had created a significant problem by engaging without proper authorization, exposing herself to extreme and unnecessary risk, conducting operations well outside her assigned role and mission parameters, and making strategic decisions that should have gone through the chain of command. If she had been killed or captured in that engagement, it would have created an international incident and potentially compromised ongoing operations in the region. Clyer quietly acknowledged she fully understood the implications. The colonel stated he didn't think she completely understood the scope of what she had created, pulling out a file folder and setting it deliberately on the table between them. He explained the file contained 2 documents with her name on them. The first was a recommendation for a Silver Star for conspicuous gallantry in action against an enemy force, and the second was a formal letter of reprimand for disobeying direct orders and exceeding operational authority. He let that sink in for a moment before stating both recommendations were completely justified based on her actions and both would be going into her official record. Clyer nodded, accepting the consequences, recognizing it was a fair assessment since she had saved lives but had also broken the rules to do it, which in the special operations community was always a complicated calculation. However, the colonel continued, his tone shifting slightly, stating there was a third document in the file, a recruitment request from a highly classified unit that had been tracking her career with considerable interest, and today's operation convinced them she was exactly what they were looking for. Her commanding officer spoke up for the first time, explaining that Captain Cole, this unit specialized in operations where one operator with the right combination of technical skills and independent judgment could achieve strategic effects in denied areas, conducting long-range precision targeting in locations where conventional forces couldn't operate, performing solo infiltration and engagement in environments where backup wasn't available and wouldn't be coming, the kind of work where you're alone, unsupported, and expected to make tactical and sometimes strategic decisions in real time that will either save lives or create international complications. Clyer asked carefully what unit they were discussing. The colonel stated she didn't get to know that until she formally accepted their recruitment offer, but what he could tell her was that they had been watching her for over a year, reviewing every operation, every shot, every decision she had made in the field, and what happened 3 days ago wasn't an aberration in their eyes but confirmation that she thought and operated exactly the way they needed their people to think and operate. The SEAL commander added these were the people who got called when the conventional approach wouldn't work, when the situation was so complicated, so politically sensitive, or so tactically impossible that sending in a team wasn't an option, and they needed operators who could work alone, think independently, and accomplish missions that officially never happen. Clyer considered carefully, reflecting that she had joined the army to make a real difference, to be part of something larger than herself, to use her skills where they mattered most, but she had learned over multiple deployments that sometimes making the biggest difference meant operating outside the traditional command structure in the shadows, in the margins where one person with the right skills and the courage to act could change everything. The colonel was watching her face, stating this wasn't a decision she needed to make right now and she should take some time to think about what she wanted her career to look like, but she should understand that if she accepted, she would be leaving conventional special operations behind, operating alone more often than not in situations where backup isn't coming and extraction isn't guaranteed, with missions that would be more dangerous, stakes that would be higher, and recognition that would be non-existent because nothing she did would ever be acknowledged officially. She inquired when she would need to decide. The colonel stated she had 72 hours, after which the offer expired and she returned to her current unit. Clyer stood and came to attention, thanking him and stating she would have her answer within 48 hours. As she turned to leave, the SEAL commander stood and extended his hand, stating that whatever she decided, she should know that his men and he owed her their lives, and that wasn't something they forgot ever. Clyer shook his hand firmly, stating she was just doing her job. He said quietly that she was doing something more than that, doing what needed to be done regardless of what the rules said, and that was rare, advising her not to lose that quality. Clyer spent the next 48 hours reviewing her career, her motivations, and what she wanted to accomplish with the skills she had spent years developing. She thought about the 8 men who went home to their families because she had refused to follow the book, and she thought about all the other situations where one skilled operator in the right place at the right time could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. She made her decision in 36 hours. 18 months later, Captain Claire Cole, though she no longer used that rank in her current assignment, stood on a different ridgeline in a different unnamed country, watching through her scope as a convoy of vehicles moved through a narrow mountain pass. The mission brief had been characteristically simple: eliminate a high-value target traveling in the third vehicle, an individual whose continued existence represented a significant threat to regional stability and American interests. Simple, except the convoy consisted of 12 vehicles with over 60 heavily armed security personnel and mobile air defense systems that made any form of helicopter insertion or drone strike impossible. The conventional approach would have been to wait for a better opportunity, a more favorable tactical situation, but intelligence indicated this was a now or never scenario, and missing this window meant the target would disappear into a location where even this unit couldn't reach him. Claire had spent 3 days infiltrating to this position, moving alone through some of the most hostile terrain on Earth, carrying her rifle and enough supplies. To survive, she had been in position for 18 hours, waiting for the convoy to appear, calculating wind patterns, temperature variations, and the dozens of other variables that affected a shot at this range: 847 meters, steep downward angle, variable mountain winds, moving target in an armored vehicle, a shot that most snipers would call impossible. Claire had built her reputation on impossible shots. She chambered a round, made her final calculations, and settled into the shooting position she had refined over thousands of hours of practice. The SEALs from that jungle operation had sent her a gift before she had transferred to her new unit, a custom-made patch that she now wore on her gear, unofficial and against regulations but deeply meaningful: 12 targets, 8 minutes, 1 shot, 1 kill, no excuses. She had earned that patch in a valley choked with jungle when she had proven that sometimes the most dangerous person on a battlefield is the one with the patience, skill, and absolute determination to take the shot when everyone else says it's impossible. The convoy approached her optimal firing window, the third vehicle moving at approximately 40 kilometers per hour. The target would be visible through the window for approximately 2 seconds as the vehicle rounded a curve in the road, 2 seconds to change the strategic situation in an entire region, 2 seconds to justify 3 days of infiltration and 18 hours of waiting. Claire controlled her breathing, found the natural pause between heartbeats, and reminded herself of the fundamental lesson she had learned that day in the jungle. The book says one sniper can't change the outcome of a battle, but the book doesn't account for snipers who refuse to accept impossible, who refuse to let good people die while following rules that don't match the reality on the ground. The target vehicle entered the curve, and through her scope, she could see the passenger clearly, exactly who intelligence had said would be there. Her finger found the trigger with the familiar pressure she had applied thousands of times. In the valley below, the target was seconds away from rounding the curve and disappearing, completely unaware that his life was being measured in the time it takes for a .50 caliber round to travel 847 meters through mountain air. Claire squeezed the trigger. The Barrett roared, the massive recoil absorbed by her shoulder and the weapon's excellent dampening system. Through her scope, she tracked the round for the second it took to cover the distance. Impact. The vehicle swerved violently, the driver reacting to something catastrophic inside the passenger compartment. The convoy immediately went into protective mode with vehicles accelerating and dispersing and security personnel deploying to scan for threats. But Claire was already moving, breaking down her position, beginning the 3-day exfiltration that would get her out of the country before anyone even came close to finding where the shot originated from. Mission complete, target eliminated, strategic situation altered, 1 rifle, 1 operator, 1 shot that would never be acknowledged, never be celebrated, never officially exist. As she moved through the mountains, Claire thought about the 8 men from that jungle valley who had gone home to their families. She thought about whatever threat the target in that convoy had represented, now permanently neutralized. She thought about all the operations she had conducted since joining this unit, missions that prevented attacks, saved lives, and changed outcomes in ways the public would never know about and the government would never acknowledge. This was the real war she had learned, Not the big battles with thousands of troops and air support and international headlines, but the small, precise actions in the shadows, one skilled operator in exactly the right place at exactly the right time making the shots that changed everything. The book said one person couldn't make a difference against impossible odds, but Claire Cole had spent her career proving the book wrong, one impossible shot at a time, and she wasn't finished yet.